Hello, dear friends. This is Jeannie from Dollhouse Rescue. I am back on my workshop tonight and I'm going to do something a little different. I'm making several small videos just to answer specific questions that I've had from my dollhouse friends that have been buying some vintage dollhouses and they want to do a little work on them. Not quite sure where to start, don't want to watch a whole video series. So I'm just doing a couple of short little videos to answer some questions. Tonight we're going to do a little bit of painting on this floor, and I've got another one underneath I think I'll work on too, just a little bit. And what we're talking about tonight is blending paint and how to get the right color. Well, let's get started. I've got some of my favorite colors here. I've got white and black in the bigger bottles, and then in the smaller ones I've got a couple shades of blue, and I've got brown. This one's kind of a teal blue, and then I've got brown. I have found that it's a lot of times a good idea in these dollhouses to add just a touch of brown to get that nice vintage color. Some of these colors, they might look like a bright green, but it's actually a little more muted than you would find on new things. The other thing I've got is a palette. Mine is just it's an old cutting board, and it's plastic. I can wash it off. Sometimes I cover it with wax paper so that after I use it a while, I can just peel that off and throw it away. Tonight, I don't have any wax paper on there. We're going to start with white. Now we've got a couple areas up here, like right in here, that just needs a little touch up, and a couple more over in here. And these are what I would call white. But when you're working on a vintage dollhouse, I call that dollhouse white. White on a vintage dollhouse is almost always some variation of an off-white or a very light tan. So I have got on my palette a couple of drops of paint that I think will find useful. One is white, one is brown, and then I've got a little bit of black that's starting to run here. I don't know if we'll even use him. Let's start by taking a little bit of white and put it to the side, because if I don't want to use my white later, it won't be contaminated. And then I'm going to get a little bit of brown, and when I use brown, I don't want very much. So I put my brush in there, then I tap it off several times. And now that my brush is almost completely tapped off, I'll mix it up over here. And now I've got a nice shade of tan. I have a feeling that's going to be very close to what I need. Next, to see if I'm right, I take my piece that I want to paint and I just put a little touch of paint on there and see, does this look like it's a pretty good match? Oh, it does look pretty good. Now your first coat, I'm really not too concerned if it's not a good match, because I'll probably do another coat and I can do a little color correction on my second coat. But honestly, that looks really good. Let's try these little dots down here, see if it's still a good match. Wow, that looks pretty good. And it's probably not critical that they match exactly, especially on these little, those are like little outline bricks, I think. So they don't have to match exactly. And if I don't like it, I can go back over it with a second coat, maybe just a little bit darker, and I may do that. Let's do another dot here. Wow, it's looking better already. Now I want to tell you, I would call this floor, it's going to be easy to paint. When you have these areas out here that are light and dark, I'll put a little light on there. In fact, I might do it right now and see how that looks. Then if it needs to have a little bit of the green, I'll go back and do that. And sometimes I just touch my brush to that and then kind of wipe it off. And that paint will kind of stick to those areas that were kind of an eyesore. And honestly, that might be all that needs out there. I think it is. See, I told you that was going to be easy. Now, for these areas, this is all going to be also going to be easy. But I'll mix up some yellow, and I'll go in and fill in those little squares with yellow. And then I'll mix up this very light pale greenish blue, and then I'll fill in those little areas. So this floor will not be a challenge. And even this part down here where it's quite a mess, that won't be hard. But I've done another video not too long ago that showed how to fill in those patio blocks and to make them look really nice. So tonight we're going to focus on matching color. So I think our white looks good. If we wanted to, we could put a little more brown in there and do a second coat. Now, I call my second coat is my color correction coat, or maybe it'd be the third coat, depending on how much coverage you need. Again, I'm going to tap it in the brown, then tap it out of the brown. Get most of that brown off, put it back in my white, and make that white just a little bit darker, a little bit more of a tan. And then put it down here. Now remember, this paint often will dry a little bit darker, so you really can't tell for sure if you've got a good color match until it's dried. Yeah, that's really blending in nice. I'm very happy with those boxes. If you put something you don't like it, just wipe it off. It's acrylic paint. You can always wipe it off with your thumb when it's wet. You can wipe it off with a damp rag when it's dry. It's easy to take off if you don't like it. You really can't do anything wrong. You're just making it look a little bit better than it did. All right, that's white. Now, when it dries, if you don't like it, put another coat on, a little lighter or darker, whatever you might need. I think this is going to dry just fine, but when it dries, I'll look at it again and then I'll decide. And all of these little bricks down here, all were a little bit, grubby looking. Maybe a little bit of tiny rust on there, I don't know. But I want them to look nice. I want it to look well maintained. So like if somebody else is looking at this house later, they don't look at it and say, oh, that looks like it's dirty. No, it doesn't look dirty. It looks well maintained. Maybe you can tell it was painted, maybe not. All right, that's it for that. Let's mix up a color of green and see how that goes. As it's dried, I'm feeling like these blocks here are good, but that these down here should have been a little bit lighter. So I just took a little bit of white on my palette and put it in my little spot of brown paint right there in the middle. I took a little dab of white, put it in the middle, swirled it around a little bit. We're going to go just a shade lighter on those other little blocks. So that's an easy way to kind of color correct, is to use your palette then as your guide. And it looks like on here it's going on just a little lighter, which I think is what we needed to do. They looked not quite as clean as I thought they should look. And when they dry, I'll check them again. And if they're still a little dark, I'll go over them again. I have a couple of shades of green paint. This one's like almost a grass green. They call it Jubilee green. This one is, I'd call it more of a pine green. It says hunter green on it. This I think would be too dark. So let's use this, but we'll probably have to darken it up just a little bit. And remember, my trick is a lot of times I'll put a little brown in there to mute that a little bit. We'll try that, and if we need a little black, we'll put a little black in there. Okay, I got my green, and I got a new little dot of black on there and some brown, and I'm using that green that I called a grass green. Now this is without having any mixing done to it. Let's just put it on there and see. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but it looks almost, well, it's too bright, too light, too bright. And I thought that might be. It's going to need a little bit of black and or maybe a little bit of brown. I'm going to try the brown first. So again, I'm going to use that trick where I'm going to touch my brush in the brown on my palette. Here you can see, here's my green paint, my black, and my brown, and I'm going to touch it up here. I don't have to be quite as careful this time because, I'm not working with the white. And mix that up in there and just see how that goes. I think it's going to need just a little bit more than that. Like I said, your white needed less, but this might need just a little bit more. I think that's getting a little better. It's kind of muting that down just a little bit, making it a little bit more that vintage color. I don't know that we need the black. Let's try it on here and see how it looks. Wow, that's really a pretty good match. Remember, it's going to dry a little darker. Now, that was a scratch that was white, so it's probably going to need to have 2 coats. But some of these that are more of a brown color from the rust, they'll probably just need 1 coat. That is really looking pretty good. But you really, you can't really exactly tell for sure until it's dry. The other thing is I like to turn it and hit this edge along here. A lot of times there's wear or rust along that edge, and you want it to just look as nice as you can. I'm not quite as concerned about the color match on that area, but I do want to be sure to hit it so that looks nice along there when the house is being displayed or played with. All right, let me touch these up and then we'll come back and check the color on them. As those have dried, they almost are a little dark. I am going to try a little bit of white. I've still got that little pile of white on my palette. So I'm going to try that where I'm just going to take my brush, kind of tap it in there and tap it to the side so I don't get too much white. And then come down here to my blob of green and lighten that up just a little bit. Let's see how that looks. Did we go too far? Let's try it out. That is looking really, really good. That has blended in very nicely. Another technique, and you probably saw me doing it. Sometimes I'll touch it with my finger. Sometimes I'll just kind of tap it with my brush and then kind of blend that into the neighboring area that did not need paint to kind of blend that in. That turned out to be a very good match. All right, let's move on and do one more color. All right, this is the nursery in the Marks T Ranch house. And my nursery's got some missing paint. There's a big blob there. There's some little bit missing like on this block. We're going to look at the light blue today. This had some glue on it, which I've decided not to try to take off. I've sanded it, some of the bigger spots a little bit, but some of these littler spots, I'm just going to touch paint on them and see how it looks. I have two reasons I picked this particular floor to work on. Number one, I have a couple of my dollhouse friends that are working on this house. So I think they would appreciate that I'm using this as an example. The other thing is that to tell the truth, sometimes a light blue is challenging for me. So I thought we'd kind of go through it here on the air, on a video, and see how it goes. Now, I like to use this particular color of blue, and I got this at, I think, Walmart. But you can buy these acrylic paints at Walmart and Hobby Lobby and Michael's. And I like this color. It seems to be a nice vintage color for these doll houses. So that came out first a little runny, so I shook it up and got a better drop. And it's a pretty rich teal, so it's going to need quite a bit of white in it to lighten it up for that dollhouse or that bedroom, that nursery room. So we're going to do that same thing. I'm going to take a pile of white and put it to the side. And then this time I'm just going to kind of tap that blue and not get very much of that blue. And we'll see if that's a true enough blue for that floor. That doesn't look too bad. A little greenish. I might need a little bluer tint. But let's try it. We'll put a dot on the floor and just see how it looks. Is it crazy light or crazy blue or what? Let's just take a look. A little bit light. Yeah, probably too light. It's going to dry a little darker, but too light. Let's wipe it off and add something to it. All right, I added just a touch of that very same teal blue to that pile that I had. And look at that, is a pretty good match. Now I'm putting it over here on these rust spots, rust kind of glue spots. And I'm just going to tap it on there, and then maybe brush it with my finger. And look, that's really not a bad match. And again, if it wasn't a good match, I would just color correct it with a new coat. A big spot like this is going to take at least 2 coats of paint, if not 3. So it's okay to, if your first coat doesn't match, because you're going to do at least 2 coats and probably 3. So let's just go ahead and take a chance and put this color on there, fill that spot in, and then we'll take a look at it. I think my hand's making a shadow there. I felt like that came off as a little too greenish blue, so I got out another bottle of blue. This one is called Cobalt Blue, but it's more what I would call almost a royal blue or a more true blue. I put a little dot here on my palette, and then from my dot, I put it over here into my my wet pile where I was using it. I had kind of a robinate blue, and I'm making a little more of a powder blue. And then because that made it a little darker, I took from my white and made it just a little bit whiter. And I feel like we're getting a pretty good match now. But remember, don't be concerned if your first coat doesn't match, because you're going to go back and do a second coat anyway, and then you can do that color correction. And that blue is coming out a lot better now. And when it dries, we'll see if it's too dark or too light. If it's a little dark, we'll add a little white. If it's too light, we'll add just a little more of that blue. But that is getting to be a much better color match now. We're getting there. It's looking a lot better. Now, it may never exactly look like new again, but it's going to look so much better than it did. It's going to look clean. It's going to look maintained. It's going to look like you've cared for it. And again, sometimes I just tap it on there and kind of tap it with my finger and brush it off. Okay, this is getting really close, dear friends. I did two things. I followed my own advice. First of all, I felt like that first spot here was just too dark. It had too much green. I took my damp cloth, wiped it all off, and started fresh with a fresh new layer, a new coat, and then some color correcting coats. And I also added a touch of brown in there just to mute that down a little bit. And you probably can't tell, but I'm telling you, it looks so much better. Now, some of these need another coat, and some of them I've not done at all yet, like I've not done this spot here at all, or that spot. But the ones that I've done look so much better. Really close match. I added a tint of brown and just a little bit more white. As it dried darker, and it also tended to, as it dried, the green came out a little more than the blue. So that's why I had to adjust with a little more blue in there. Looks really good. I hope these tips have been useful for you, dear friends. Don't be afraid to try it. It makes your house look so much better. Invest a little bit of your time and effort into it. And if you don't like it, it's acrylic paint. Wipe it off and do it again. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. Please let me know if you have any questions. And remember, you always have a friend here in Iowa. I know a lot of friends in our Facebook groups, and I hope you'll join us. And please subscribe to my channel. It means a lot to me. Thank you very much.